Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice, Trifecta Collective. And this is my co-host, Shannon Callery, our head practitioner here in the practice. So today's topic is nervous system regulation, and I'll put maybe in parentheses here, trauma healing, because we're also going to talk a lot about trauma healing as this relates to nervous system regulation and trauma patterns and being stuck in trauma patterns. And so lots and lots of good stuff here. As always, we have a lot of experience with this. And, for me right now, this is most of the work that I do personally. My physical body is in a pretty darn good spot. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. But most of the deeper healing work I do now is around trauma healing, nervous system regulation, that kind of work. And Shannon has lots of experience as well, going through all kinds of stuff like this. So let's dive right in with what is nervous system regulation, so we can get a little bit clearer on what this actually is, and probably talk a little bit about what this is not. So when we talk about nervous system regulation, this is really talking about our body's ability to handle stress and not get stuck in chronic states of survival. And this kind of, most commonly we think about like fight or flight. I'm also going to throw being stuck in a state of freeze in here. And it's really about our body's ability to manage and kind of go into like, if we go into a stressful situation, can we re-regulate and kind of come back down into a more relaxed state so the rest of our body, physical, mental, emotional, is not greatly impacted for long periods of time.
Yeah. Oh my, as you were talking, I was just thinking about how I got stuck in a freeze this weekend. That's where my mind went. And it ties in perfectly to this because the whole point of like being able to regulate your nervous system is kind of to like feel it, catch it, and then be able to bring yourself down to like a regular spot so you can still function. And this weekend, I actually had a really difficult time doing that. It took me like a couple hours, but anyway, we'll talk about that more in a little bit when it gets tied in. But yeah, so just like, and you kind of pretty much, you just covered like, talking about the body's ability to manage stress and just being able to calm back down again. But you didn't touch on what it's not yet, did you? I didn't hear you say that. Okay.
No.
So I'm sure people have heard of the word or the phrase toxic positivity. That's mainly what we want to share nervous regulation. Oh my gosh, tongue twister today. Nervous system regulation is not. It is not toxic positivity. So like when we say this, we're not talking about like putting on a happy face all the time or just like shoving your emotions or feelings down or just trying to look at everything with like, big scenarios like, oh, it's fine. Like this doesn't affect me. I'm going to move on. That's like shoving your feelings down and not actually going through the emotions. And when we do that, when we have like this toxic sense about it, it really is toxic. And I kind of want to like drill that in here is you're shoving those emotions down and all they're doing is getting stored in your body in different areas. And then they're going to start to cause like a whole slew of other issues.
Yeah. And it's the phrase that I really love is sunshine and rainbows. That's and I see these people on social media and people who talk about trauma healing and nervous system regulation, and they're like, my life is so great and I live at the beach and the sun is shining and I'm grounded and just like everything in life is perfect and my relationships are perfect and work is perfect. Good for you if your life is like that. None of the work I have ever done is anything like that. yes, I have found more peace, more joy, more gratitude, more appreciation for nature, for all kinds of things. Um, but it's a wild ride to get there. And it's not an all the time kind of thing. It's there's ebbs and flows, and I like to say, like, riding the waves of of life and emotions and the healing process. And it really is like it's a lot of up and downs as you're going through this process. And it's really not just all happiness and joy and peace. And once again, like, if that is the case for some people, props to you. I'm so happy for you. Like, amazing, great for you. But also, for the most of us, it is definitely not like that. And I think it's doing people a disservice. And I've seen people, I've seen people get really, really down and really hard on themselves when they're like, I just can't think, I can't be positive about this. Like, I can't find the joy. And you're like, yeah, maybe you're not ready to find the joy. We got to process a lot of things here to be able to move these and get out of these patterns. And it's work. It is hard work. It is, of all of the work I've ever done, all of the physical work, with chronic pain, with chronic issues, with autoimmunity, gut stuff, like everything. I mean, this work is the hardest. It's the hardest stuff I've ever done, and continues to be that way. And it's also the most worthwhile and healing in such deep and significant ways as I go through this. And I I should probably also just throw out there, I am also just a few weeks back from my own healing trip to Colombia. And we will bring this up more later in the episode when we talk about healing, like trauma healing modalities. But also, I am really fresh off of this. I'm not going to share a ton about my experience. I will at a later date. I will on another episode. Uh, but this is very real and very present for me right now. And so I really speak to you from like I mean, by far the hardest work I've ever done. And also by far the most valuable from an entire life perspective, work I've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I haven't done anything like big journey wise like Megan has. I've done some other things kind of like smaller scale, but still I can still I will say the same thing that she just said. Like this is the hard work, the really, really difficult work when you are looking at yourself in the mirror and seeing all the things that come up that make you uncomfortable, that like essentially like your building blocks of what makes you you, and trying to like unwrap it and learn new things and change things. Like it is really, really, really hard work, but it's so worth it because in the end, like you're just getting to know yourself better as a person. You get clarity, you figure out what you really want, and you just like live your life more, the way that you want to live it. However, it's never going to be like a consistent, like, oh, I'm happy all the time, like this is good. It's always going to be like this because that's how life is. Like new things are going to get brought up. Old past experiences are going to get brought up. So it's really just like learning how can I navigate this in a sense that it's not like throwing me off the rails every time something happens. Like, yes, you can be discombobulated for like a couple days, even a week, but like ultimately, that like your flow is going to come back and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, and being able to recognize when you're in the middle of it
Oh, yes, that's
and
huge.
really, and I guess let me take a step back here. So this is really about layers. And so you're peeling back layers, especially if you have a long trauma history. Both of us have quite a bit of trauma, uh, as do many other people. And this is, capital T trauma, lowercase t trauma, all of it, childhood, early adulthood, maybe you're living in it currently. And so this is peeling back layers of this. And as you start to learn and do more of this work, and and really where I think a lot, both of us are now, when we're in the middle of the hard parts or peeling back a new layer, maybe some things that we thought were healed are starting to come back up, and we're able to recognize it. Not that it's not hard as we're actually going through it, because it absolutely is, but having that awareness that, hey, this is coming up right now, and then also having tools in your toolbox in supporting yourself in a lot of ways. And we are going to go through a lot of ways and techniques and things to help support you as you're going through this. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about all of this today, but yeah, it's really, really about peeling back these layers. And that kind of leads us into, I feel like this a little controversial, but also I think this is really important to talk about. And that's therapy, talk therapy in particular. And look, like, talk therapy is great. It's amazing. There's a lot of reasons to go to talk therapy. And when it comes to trauma healing and a lot of nervous system regulation work, just talking about these things often don't make real shifts and real change. And I spent over 10 years in talk therapy, going from anywhere between 1 to 3 times a week. I saw a psychiatrist, a psychologist, licensed therapists of varying degrees and backgrounds. And I never felt a real shift. Sometimes I'd feel better in the moment just talking about things that were going on and things that were happening in my life. But there was never a shift. And I stopped going to therapy at one point because I just wasn't seeing real change. And we do get this feedback quite a bit. Once again, if your therapist, talk therapist, helped you work through a lot of things, like, amazing, great. I'm so happy. Like, that's amazing. And maybe they were using some other tools. But for many people who just do talk therapy with a licensed therapist who is only a talk therapist and only trained in that world and realm and modality, it can be very challenging to really make some shifts and to see massive change.
Yeah, and I've also had quite a similar experience. I think I started going to therapy I at least 10 or 12 years in talk therapy. And really, when it came to a head, like in my like early mid 20s, I think the last thing I went to talk therapy for was like eating disorder stuff. And in through that whole time span of years, I will say that I did learn some really good, like, basic coping mechanisms, but again, not things to help. I don't want to say like get rid of that behavior, because that's not really the right term, but just like you said, the shift, just move past it in a different manner. I also did not experience that with talk therapy. The only time that I started to experience that shift was when we went into some of the deeper stuff, like emotional trauma stuff that we're going to jump into here in a second. But and yeah, I don't want to sound like we're discrediting therapists either, because they are there for a time and a place, and it's a really good starting point if you are like brand new to all of this. I do think like going to a couple therapy sessions is not a bad thing. You are going to learn something from it for sure, and that will be helpful at some point. It's just when you really want to make like these deep shifts and changes, oftentimes we see that you need something different than this.
Yeah, and look, there are trauma therapists out there, and we'll talk through a few modalities. But there's also just therapists who are trained in trauma, and it's very different. It's very, very different than just regular. I have, someone who lives very close to me, a friend that is trained as a trauma therapist. She's also trained in other modalities, and we have this conversation a lot. And she's like, it's just different. Like, the things that I learned focusing on trauma therapy versus just like cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy, it's totally different. And it's just the training looks different. And so, yeah, regular talk therapy, great for so many things. Absolutely, go. But if you want to shift a lot of these trauma patterns, often people will really struggle doing that, because it's just different. And it's doing different things. And yeah, it's just different. And that's okay. Not all therapy has to be about nervous system regulation and trauma healing and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of other reasons to go to talk therapy. So yeah, and so let's start talking about some of these other modalities and we'll kind of break it up. For me, there's really kind of two pieces of nervous system regulation, of trauma healing. And, we talked a little bit about this in the second part of the high cortisol episode, but we're going to dive deeper into this today. And this is really, one, we store emotions and we store traumas in the body. We know this. It has been studied. There are many books, many books about it. Some of these modalities we'll talk about have books written in regards to them. And so, yeah, trauma is stored in the body and it can make us physically ill. Just to give you some examples, and we're about to go into trauma here. So just full disclosure, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but blanket trigger warning here of just like trauma in general, and a wide scope of that. Gut issues, we'll often see something going on with like solar plexus, things stored in the stomach, in the liver. Like we'll see emotions really trapped in there, and that can present as gut issues. If you have bloating, a lot of gut issues, constipation, we often think of like holding on to things. This was huge to me when I learned about this. I would go, that's why I was constipated for literally almost all of my life, because I was just holding on to things, shoving all of my feelings down because it wasn't safe in my home environment growing up. Growing up with a single mom who was an alcoholic, like it wasn't safe. There was always like emotional abuse was always present. There was always the threat of physical abuse, and so I just shoved it all down. And constipation is a clear result of that.
Yep.
We think about like the sacral chakra and we think about, hormone imbalances, trauma around like sexual trauma with the feminine and the masculine. I'm not quite ready to share too much about this. I will in the future, but this has been a big thing for me, and resulted certainly in hormone imbalances. And I've noticed huge shifts as I've really gone through healing masculine, feminine wounds, mother, father wounds, sexual trauma wounds, like real shifts in hormones overall. We think about thyroid issues and the throat chakra. Once again, this hits home for me. Serious like people pleasing patterns, like really inability to say no, like a fear of rejection, always wanting to be accepted, always wanting to be viewed as like nice or responsible, or you're like the go-to person, and afraid to speak up for yourself. I mean, I'm totally convinced that this played a huge part in my hypothyroid and Hashimoto's diagnosis. And I've spent a lot of time clearing my throat chakra and being able to figure out who I am and then be able to confidently express who I am. And, still working through that sometimes, some of the time. So,
that's a lifelong thing. Like it gets better, but realistically, that's just something we're always going to be working on.
Exactly. So yeah, these traumas, I'll say the other one big one, I'll say two other big ones, sorry. The lungs, if we look at like Ayurvedic medicine, the lungs hold on to grief and sadness. If you consistently wake up around like 4 a.m., and that's like a time you don't actually have to wake up, but you start waking up around that, a lot of times this is, once again, very apparent for me. Anytime I start waking up around 4 a.m., it's because I'm holding on to some grief and sadness and not fully feeling and allowing it to be processed. It can also result in some breathing issues. I actually had an instance, and I don't remember how long ago this was, but yeah, I was having a lot of breathing issues, like randomly, and all of a sudden, I actually went to a doctor and they took an x-ray of my lungs and they were like, oh, you have asthma. And I go, I don't have asthma. I've never had asthma. That is definitely not on my plate. I'm not wheezing. It's definitely not asthma. And it wasn't, I took steroids for it for a week, and it wasn't until I did some emotional and energetic work that it started to heal and go away. And then the liver. The liver is always a big one for us. You know how much we talk about liver detox pathways and yes, there's a lot of physical things that we can do, but also two big emotions stored in the liver is our anger and resentment. And a lot of us hold on to a lot of anger and resentment. I find especially anyone who had childhood trauma and didn't get to fully be and experience we'll say normal, quote unquote normal, more normal childhood. A lot of times we'll see a lot of stuff coming up in the liver with that anger and resentment.
Yeah, for sure. Even just in when you I want to elaborate on the quote unquote normal childhood. Pretty much like I feel like a big part of that means like were you taught how to handle and express and deal with your emotions, or were you taught like you shouldn't cry, like all the stereotypical things like that. I feel like that's what the quote unquote normal means like.
Yeah. And, did you feel safe, generally
Yes.
safe during your childhood? Did you feel loved? Did you feel seen? Did you feel heard? All of these things. It's not just like physical safety. Like, were you
Yeah.
physically safe? Like, were your parents present? Like, did you feel like you were an outcast? Like that plays a big role. Did you not feel loved? Did you not feel like you fit in with your family, with friends, like with people growing up? I mean, all of that plays such a big role in our trauma history.
Yeah, for sure. I'm laughing because I'm sure you're going to agree with this, but I feel like that's still how it is now. I'm still like, I'm an outcast a little bit on this earth. Like, I don't know that I'm meant to do the same things that people are doing. But so again, I don't know if that
Yeah.
fully goes away for some people either, but to a certain
I
extent.
yeah, and so this has actually been a big part of my journey is feeling like the weirdo, the crazy one, the eccentric kind of person into some different things, not following the norm.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been pretty recent where I've been able to fully accept that and be like, yep, this is who I am. I like all kinds of weird stuff and I'm totally into it. And if you want to learn about it, great. If you don't, that's totally fine. But I'm totally into it and it's okay.
Yeah. No, I love
Yeah.
that. I'm close to there. Again, it's a process. And for anyone who's like in the middle of this work or diving into this work, like you'll know what we're talking about. Like it
Yeah.
is just a process and a journey to get there, but it feels really good when you get to the other side.
It does. Yeah. When you really stop caring and just fully, you're just like, yeah, this is who I am. Take it or leave it. Not everyone's going to like me. That's totally fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you do, great. I love it. I'm totally into it. If you want to do deep dives on anything I'm into, if you want to bring something new to the table, great. I'm all for it. Let's learn about it. Tell me all about it. Let me experience it.
Yes.
So yeah.
I
So
love
so we
that.
have this like physical part. So and if we think about this physical part, I guess maybe we'll break this down and we'll cover all the physical part and then move on to the other part.
Okay.
So when we think about releasing and healing a lot of, how emotions, how trauma is stored in our body, the first thing that always comes to mind for me, and we'll talk about it, several different modalities and maybe even some modalities within this, but somatic work. Somatic work is a huge area where there's some amazing things that you can do and being able to release these emotions and release these traumas from the body. And I mean, if you just go on YouTube and look at like somatic healing sessions, I mean, it's incredible. If you can find a somatic therapist, there's lots of them out there. I mean, really, really powerful work to be able to release these things from your body.
Yeah, and there's like in my head more we're talking more physical right now. So somatic work is a lot of like it's like shaking and like moving, like getting the energy to flow out of you. So it's not saying staying stagnant within you. But I also know and I have worked with a somatic therapist before where it was more not so much like the physical shaking and movement release, like actually like feeling into like kind of like parts work, feeling into the body and like, the imagery and the messages that come up during that and having a release from that too. So I know somatic work can kind of be an umbrella for like both those things.
Yeah, and it's yeah, getting things out from the body, and there's a lot of ways to do that. For me, and I shared this last episode too. It's For me coming into trauma healing work and nervous system regulation work, the concept of what are you feeling was so foreign. And I mean, I couldn't, what feeling, what emotion are you feeling? I don't know. I don't know what emotions feel like. I've just shoved them all down as deep and as dark as I can forever because it was too much for me to handle. And so recognizing of those emotions, let alone kind of the next step of like, where do you feel that in your body? And being able to like be like, what do you even mean? Like, how do you feel emotions in your body? What, like, how is that a thing? And having that be a thing and being able to learn how to connect with your body. And when something comes up for you, like for me, when I'm stressed, when something like doesn't quite feel right, for me, it almost always shows up in my solar plexus. Like it shows up right below my rib cage, and it feels like to me like cramping, like nodding, like maybe I might get a little bit nauseous even. And that's how that really shows up for me in my physical body, that particular type of emotion.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. It feels like I have a giant knot in my stomach, or just like almost like someone's almost like squeezing me like around
Mm,
like my rib cage and my stomach, and I
mhm.
get knots. And as soon as I get that feeling, and sometimes I have to check myself because when you're like doing stuff, going about your day, and you're like, oh, what's that coming from? And then I really slow down and I'm like, wait a second. Like I need to address this because I can't let it go on or else it's just gonna get worse.
Exactly. So yeah, being able to tune in with your body and understand where you feel emotions, how you feel emotions, even like feeling into sensations and how things want to come up and how things they want to come out. We think about sadness, for sadness, a lot of people want to cry. Not everyone wants to cry. That's not how that emotion wants to come out all the time for all people, or even sometimes for people. Maybe you need to like physically like tap your body or tune into your body. Maybe you need to scream, maybe you need to move, need to dance, need to breathe in a specific way. Breath work is another really, really powerful tool for releasing things. Once again, if you go on YouTube, there's, I mean, just like if you look at like really intense like breathwork healing sessions, not that you have to do it this way, but just if you go on there, you'll really see just the level of impact a lot of this work can have in just being able to have this come up in big crying sessions or people needing to scream or needing to shake and their bodies shaking in certain ways. For me, because I've stored so much in my body, I've never actually worked with a somatic therapist. With somatic work, I had a therapist who did somatic work, but we were doing other things.
Mhm.
And during a lot of my, and we'll talk more about this at the end, but I've done a lot of psychedelic work and work in the psychedelic assisted therapy world. And we will talk more about that in this episode and later. But a lot of my experiences result in a lot of shaking,
Mhm.
just in a lot of uncontrollable. Sometimes it's full body shake. Sometimes it's just my hips. Sometimes it's just one side of my body, which is fascinating to me. And usually has like a masculine feminine correlation for me. So, and if we think about the shaking aspect, just like where we think about this and how this really comes up and why shaking is so powerful, because we'll also talk about another modality that is shaking related. When animals in the wild get scared, have fear, their life is being threatened, a lot of times they shake and they start to tremble. And this is their natural response because their body knows they're not over out thinking themselves and being like, don't shake, just stand still. It's their body's natural way of releasing this in the moment. And as humans, we're not very good at, nor is it always acceptable to just start shaking when you're experiencing these things. I wish it was. I wish it was more commonly accepted. That would be very interesting in our society. But that's the natural response. I was like, get this out in the moment by shaking. And that way you're not holding on to it. That way it's not stored. You're feeling it. You're also releasing it as you're feeling it. And then you can move on.
Yeah. And just the release portion of it, like, that's I feel like the main purpose of this is, like, you just don't want your body to hold on to it because then it manifests and turns into different things. But the other form I believe that you were gonna bring up was TRE. Is that what
Mhm.
you were thinking about? Yeah, so that stands for trauma release exercises. And they actually, they use this in the military for people with, like, PTSD or, traumatic brain injuries or, whatever else that got going on. It because it's a way to help release these things from the body. And this is a tool that I use, like, I mean, I'm using it at least once a week, but like you had mentioned, you know how your body will just start to shake when I'm feeling really like stressed out, or sometimes I don't even know that I need to shake, and I'll be sitting on the couch and I'll notice, like, if my legs are up, that they'll start to tremble, and that's like my cue. I'm like, "Oh, I should probably go do this because clearly I need it. My body's trying to tell me to do it." And that will start to happen like the more frequently that you do it, because your body does have to get comfortable with shaking first. I think the first time I did it, it actually felt very difficult for me to, like, naturally shake. It's not a trained thing, but you just have to get used to it. But that I mean, and we just had a client, that we walked through. She did this on her own, and she was, like, blown away after she did TRE. She had to go outside and do some grounding after, but she was like, "Holy cow, like, I can't believe how powerful that was." And it's something that you can do on your own at home. Like, you have access to it on YouTube, which is awesome. There's so many other, like, free tools out there just to help regulate your nervous system that are available on YouTube. So I just think that's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's such a powerful tool. And, for me, I don't, and maybe this is a trauma response, but I don't always like structure. So I actually have a whole playlist that's just shaking medicine. And whenever I'm feeling the need to really like move my body and get it out, I'll just put on a song. And ideally, if I can go outside and bare feet, the better. Obviously, that's not always an option, but spending like 5 minutes and literally just like, and once again, this does take a little bit of practice. You're going to feel
Yeah.
super silly your first handful plus times, but just letting your body move and getting your body to shake. And there's more structured modalities, and I totally forgot about these until like literally this moment. And so there's like ecstatic dance type of things that are really, they're structured but not super structured around moving your body. And it's almost like it really is. I've done a couple of these classes where you like ecstatic dance, five rhythms, journey dance. These are all kind of similar types of modalities where you kind of start, and it starts off slower and you're focused on connecting to your body, and then the music hypes up, and it takes you like way up, and you're doing, it's really like louder songs and more intense songs, and really designed to like just let go of all constructs and just move your body, dance with your body, just like whatever it needs to do. And then it like brings you back down, and brings you back down to connect with yourself again into a more peaceful, more meditative state. And it's a ride. I mean, it takes you through. And yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And a lot of yoga, if you are interested in doing these, I would find one local to you. Yoga studios are probably the best place to start looking. A lot of times they are, at least in my area, they're often held in yoga studios.
Tell me the name one more time so we can put it in the show notes, because I
Yeah.
know you've done this. I haven't done this before.
Yeah, so I would say broad category of ecstatic dance. And then in there we have five rhythms, and journey dance is another one I've done. I'm sure there's other modalities along the same lines. Those are just the ones that I'm most familiar with, slash have done, and know that are around me.
Yeah. And now that you say that, I belong to a yoga studio, and I'm pretty sure I have seen one of these things offered at one point in time. So yeah, that would be a good place for anyone to start, if you're interested. And we'll put this in the show notes so you can see what the actual names are called.
Yeah, yeah. Five rhythms is it's literally the number five rhythm. So yeah, we'll put it in there so you guys have it.
Awesome. So what are some other big ones here? So I know you wanted to touch on, EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. Do you want to go into that one?
Yeah. So once again, as with talk therapy, it is great. It is a great tool. I also, and maybe this is the way I've experienced this. However, I've also read a lot of books, worked with a lot of people in the trauma healing space of different backgrounds and varieties, and a lot of these people also have similar viewpoints. Um, but EFT really isn't going to make the biggest shifts. It is a phenomenal tool to help you manage in the moment a lot of different things like panic attacks, anxiety, stress, like in the moment. However, I don't see it making as big of an impact and actually allowing the body to fully release, allowing the traumas to fully release from the body in some of the similar ways that I have seen with some of these other modalities. And it is often kind of lumped into the same category. I don't personally, and I know people might disagree with me, and that's totally fine, but that it is important for me to share that it feels different for me. It doesn't feel like quite the same. I don't think it moves the needle quite as much, and really makes that big impact on releasing that trauma from the body or in shifting trauma patterns. I also have not seen it make those kinds of shifts either. Um,
Yeah.
so that is my standpoint on it.
Yeah, and I personally, I have not had enough. I've done it before. That's one of the things that I sometimes use. It's just another tool to have in the kit, essentially. Like when you're feeling like, I'm kind of on the same page as you. Personally, what I see it work well for, and even with clients, is just like that instant sensation to kind of help get your nervous system into a regulated place. But I wouldn't go as far to say like that it actually is fully healing trauma or like rewiring the brain, which we'll talk about in a second here. But yeah, it is a helpful tool. And I mean, we have a practitioner on our team, Brendan. She does this, and I think she has a different view of it as well. But I mean, it's different for everyone. For some people may do it, and that might be like your number one thing that you feel like really moves the needle and makes the difference for you. I think just like per you and I, that's not the experience that we've had. However, we have also dove really deep into some other things. So we like in comparison, that might be why.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's what we think. If you disagree, it is okay. You don't have to agree with everything that we think.
And try it too. I mean, that's another
Yeah,
like go look it up on YouTube. There's tons of videos out there.
yeah,
Try it and see if it works for you.
for sure. Getting into some of these other modalities before we move on to like the second piece of this. So we have parts work. Once again, you can do this by yourself, and or there are amazing therapists who do parts work. I mean, I have seen incredible results specifically with clients in doing parts work. And just, I mean, once again, like that body connection and being really able to connect with the body and connect with the body. What I've seen the most is being able to connect with different parts, huh, go figure, different parts of themselves, different parts of their body, different parts of trauma, and really approach these from a compassionate, non-judgmental, like love and acceptance to understand and to let go. So this is definitely one of the top ones that I would recommend if you get to work with someone with parts work. I mean, I think this is a phenomenal tool.
It is. I actually had thought that I hadn't done this before, but I now remember that one of the business coaches that I worked with, she was trained in somatic therapy and parts work, and those are the sessions that I did with her because I kept thinking in my head, I'm like, how is this different than like just the general somatic work? Like there was no shaking involved, and it was 100% parts work, and let me tell you, it was a very very effective. Like so much came from doing that. So again, I'm pretty sure there's videos out there on YouTube, something that you can try on your own. I do think working with a practitioner for this one would be really helpful. Just having having someone be able to guide you through it and come up with like questions along the way would be really beneficial. You can go a lot deeper that way.
Yeah, especially if you're new.
Yeah.
I think it's really valuable. If you have some experience, I can do parts work on myself, and I can do it, a guided meditation around parts work and feel really good about it. But I also have a lot of experience just being able to dive deep. Like I really cracked under the surface here at this point, so it is a little bit different. But there's also a lot of free tools that
Yeah.
give it a try. Let's see how it works for you. And that's what a lot of this is really. You know, when you're in this nervous system regulation space and trauma healing space, the more you can try, the better. And also understand what you may have started with may not always be what you stay with, and that's okay. I have done a lot of these at a lot of different points, and there was a lot of value and benefit to doing each and every one of them at different times. So explore and don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to just like stick with one for a while and you're like, I don't know. I don't feel like this is moving the needle quite as much as it has. Like, yeah, go explore some other stuff. There's lots of stuff out there.
Yes, growth. We're not always
Yeah,
going to want to do the same thing. But yeah, just tools in the toolbox. You can take them out and use them at any time.
exactly. And so kind of I think the last one on our list here around this topic is the emotion code and body code.
Yeah.
And there are books on the emotion code and body code. You can learn how to do this yourself. There are also practitioners who do this that are phenomenal and wonderful, who can walk you through this, and it's pretty impactful. I'm a big fan. I have got the emotion code book somewhere in my behind me in my bookcase. I actually started rereading it again not all that long ago. I didn't get super far. I got a little distracted by something else, but I did start rereading it, and it is on my list to continue to still reread because I do. Yeah, it came up for me again.
I am a huge fan of this work. This was like the the emotion code and body code, both pieces, was just like really moved the needle for me, especially when I was working on healing my eating disorder. I mean, I saw a massive change just by using it. And I was not doing it on myself. I was seeing a practitioner and doing it. In fact, I still don't do it on myself. It just, for me personally, it's more effective to have someone else do it on me. But I know a bunch of people who are trained in it and they can do it on themselves. And I think that's awesome. I just prefer to actually see someone and have them walk me through it. I mean, I can't even tell you all the massive shifts that I've seen with this. I actually just had a session, like 2 sessions last month that were really big, like breakthrough ones for me. And I know it sounds kind of crazy. And this is the part where, like, yes, you might want to go read the book because it explains this a little bit more, but you can actually have like physical detox reactions from letting go of emotions. And that hit me pretty hard last month. I thought I was having like an allergy flare up, and turns out it just lasted like 2 days. And it was a crazy detox reaction just from like removing a couple emotions that were stuck like in my stomach area. So, super interesting work. I would definitely recommend checking out that more.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a great. Thank you for bringing this up because when you specifically this piece, so any of this like branch of somatic type work and I know not all of these are technically somatic related, but we're talking about like getting things out of the body here. You can absolutely have physical reactions. And I mean, I've gotten fevers, I've gotten flu-like symptoms, just like fatigue. Like I'm like so tired for several days. I remember early on when I would do energy healing sessions, and we'll talk about energy healing at the end because it's a little bit different. Same thing with psychedelics. But I mean, I would just get so tired for several days, and then all of a sudden I would just like snap out of it, and it was just because I was releasing a lot, like physically releasing a lot, and it's fine. And I am an energy healing practitioner. I trained in Reiki and use some other things. And yeah, I mean, I tell my clients, our clients all the same thing. Like, be careful with yourself for a few days. You might be tender. You might like emotions might be pretty high and pretty surface level. You may need some extra rest, extra hydration, and you might also feel like a rock star. All of
Yeah.
that can happen too. So all of it's on the table. Everyone responds differently. Every session is different. It really just depends on the person. So just know that if you feel that way, it is normal, it is okay, as you're going through this. The other thing is, you know, and maybe we're gonna have to do a separate episode on like trauma responses because I don't think we're gonna get to it today.
No.
But as you're coming out of this dysregulated system and you start doing some of this work, like you might be more tired, as just like a general thing. And here's the thing, like if your body was running on cortisol and running on all of this like chronic stress and dysregulation for so long, and now your body's coming back to a more regulated, normal, quote unquote, normal state, like where homeostasis of where it should be, your body's going to feel how you've been running on fumes for a while, and you're going to get sleepy.
Mhm.
And you also might get really emotional, and you also might have a lot of mood swings, and it can feel very unnatural. And I, once again, as someone who didn't feel feelings for a really long time, when this started to come up, I'd be like, I'm a crazy person.
Oh,
I
100%.
going back through perimenopause again? Like what is going on? I thought I fixed my hormones. And yeah, I mean, it's just really like, it's just once again, like riding this wave of just you've suppressed so much for so long, and now you're feeling all of it. And part of that might be you're feeling really tired.
Yeah. As you were saying this, it was bringing up a couple memories of like probably like 3 years ago when I really dove into like healing a lot of this trauma stuff. Like I truly felt like a crazy person. So emotional releases can come out in like so many different forms. And one of the big ones that kept happening very frequently for me was I would get like really, really intense hiccups. Probably had something to do with the fact that my breathing was like trying to regulate itself, but like really uncomfortable. Like it was so uncomfortable. But then it would turn to like laughing, and then laughing would turn to crying. And I honestly felt like I was a crazy person. And you can ask my partner this too. I think there was so many times he thought like, what the hell is happening right now? Like this is so crazy to witness. But it did go away. But I later learned that like that was an emotional release. Like there was all of these things that I had held in my body for so long, and I was finally getting comfortable with like working through them and letting them out. And that was one of the ways, as unusual as that is, for it to release out of my body. And it did stop eventually. Like that does not happen to me anymore. But yeah, it's just like the body can push things out, and it can just look different in so many ways, especially with fatigue. Super common.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's a little touch on the more the physical work, and then the other piece of this is retraining your brain and retraining these neural pathways out of these trauma patterns, out of these dysregulated patterns that we get stuck in. And for us, you don't have to start with both. At some point, if you decide to continue on in your healing journey, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to have to do both of these to really shift and to really get out of these patterns and to like feel everything and to release everything and really start to heal. And the reason being is, especially when you have childhood trauma, but this really goes with any trauma, including adulthood. It's just your brain's still really developing up until about 25. So those patterns can be particularly challenging. I won't say that the other patterns aren't challenging too, because it's all challenging. It's all big work here. It's hard to change the way your brain thinks. It's very, very possible. But, for example, I'll just give the people pleasing example just because this is a pretty darn common one. Is, for me, I was trying to be the easy child growing up. So, once again, like living single parent, alcoholic, like don't make a fuss, like don't cause problems because that's going to lead to more emotional abuse. That could lead to physical abuse, like protect yourself. And so I was always the good child. I was always like the quiet child. I was always like so easy, like, oh, she's so responsible. She's so mature for her age. Like, yeah, the good girl, like the quote unquote good girl kind of thing. And I mean, that followed me. I mean, still follows me sometimes, way better now. But in my life, I mean, I would just, I mean, 5 years ago, even just the amount of fear and terror I would feel bringing up anything that could be controversial in any personal relationship, and definitely, I mean, definitely not on social media, like definitely not on anything. And I mean, even like with someone like who I was with for many years, and we had talked about a lot of different things, just, I mean, the level of how much I would have to work myself up to bring up a mild, I mean, mildly controversial topic like that I thought like, well, maybe this could lead to an argument. I want to go this place, or I want to go do this thing, or I'm thinking about doing this. Like, just, I mean, it was a whole like week to month long event just to like prepare and gear myself up because I was so afraid of like someone saying no to me, of someone potentially like disagreeing or starting an argument, of me causing trouble, of me not being the quote unquote good girl. Like, oh my goodness, it was exhausting.
Yeah, it's a lot and it's not a good feeling. And I'm sure there's probably a ton of people out there who are relating to this as we're like telling this story, but point is that's not normal. That's not how you're supposed to feel. It shouldn't you should be able to ask for what you need, and not be afraid to start a conversation or
Yeah.
tell someone that you want to do something. Like that's not we're not meant to feel that way. That's not a normal response. So that's kind of where like that brain rewiring and what we're talking about comes into play. You I mean, and I'm saying this because this is truly what I think you will have to add that in at some point. It's not like, yes, all of this other stuff is really great, like the breath work, the journaling, all the somatic stuff, but this piece is crucial if you want to see the big shifts.
Yeah. Yeah, and totally agree. So, I mean, there's actually, I mean, brain retraining. You can go through brain retraining. This is something I heavily use with our clients. I'm a huge fan of actual brain retraining, brain rewiring work, and there's, different modalities to do this. I have a specific modality that I personally prefer around this. You can do hypnotherapy. I've done hypnotherapy. I will say, and it was great when I did it, and I wasn't quite ready for it. I hadn't even started meditating yet, and just being able to calm down and like be present, be a little bit more focused, relax into my body was very challenging for me. And so I didn't get a ton out of it, but I also recognize I really think that was where I was, because I do think it is a very, very powerful tool. But in case you're like, oh, I'd love to try hypnotherapy and see what that's like, maybe try meditating first, and try and get, just some practice, some experience with that. And it might just be a little bit easier to drop down into that so you can really start to change that subconscious programming.
Yeah, it is a learned thing for sure. I wouldn't start there.
Yeah.
But once you get more comfortable with just like kind of sitting in silence and just like being present with yourself, it's only going to be more effective too. If you want to try like the hypnotherapy and whatnot, I definitely would practice just like getting connected with yourself beforehand and then jumping into something like that.
Yeah, for sure. The other one I really love around this is EMDR. This is one of the most powerful tools I've ever found when it comes to really this retraining of the brain. Um, if you need a referral and you're in Virginia or Massachusetts, please don't hesitate to reach out. I do have someone that I really, really, really trust, and happy to send you their information privately. I will not publicly share their information, but reach out to us on social media, send us an email, and yeah, happy to share their information. But EMDR is amazing. Just and it once again, the practitioner is important. You should really not be able to do EMDR on yourself. You want someone who has varying levels of experience. There's like an introduction to EMDR, and which, from my understanding, of someone who is very highly skilled in this modality, doesn't quite cut it. And there are varying degrees of practitioners, of therapists who do this. So if you can find a good person who does EMDR, man, I think this is such a valuable tool. I've seen massive shifts with clients using EMDR for all kinds of things. And I mean, shifts in things that I mean, once again, they had been in therapy for years and years and years, and then like a couple months of a few EMDR sessions, and just life changing, absolutely life changing. So I cannot recommend EMDR enough.
Yeah. And believe it or not, that is one of the things that I haven't tried. For a while. It was on my mind and I just never got the opportunity to try it, and kind of dove into psychedelics at first before that. So I feel like I kind of skipped a step, but yeah, I mean, I've only heard great things about it. It's still something that I will most likely try at some point. I have clients who are doing it right now. And I know for especially for like PTSD and whatnot, that is EMDR is like gold star for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. So we'll wrap up with two other things that kind of a little bit of both of these, depending on kind of how you do it. The first one is energy healing. And there's a lot of modalities around energy healing. Reiki is probably the most well known, but I'm going to group energy healing as a whole. And once again, I am a Reiki practitioner. I'm a level 2 practitioner. I do use some other energies as I'm doing energy work as well. And energy work, I kind of relate it similar to acupuncture of like there's blockages kind of in the body, and some of these are emotional, physical, trauma related, emotions, like a lot can come up. And we work on just raising the frequency of our body to help reduce, limit, remove these blockages, to allow the body to be in a higher frequency or higher vibration so it can heal. And this is rooted in quantum physics. You know, everything has a vibration, including us. We're made up of atoms. Atoms vibrate. So we have this vibration, and we know that if we can raise that vibration to different frequencies and remove some of these blockages that are maybe keeping us at just different frequencies that aren't the most aligned with where we are, that can help promote healing, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. And there's a lot of ways to do energy healing. I have a very specific way that I like to do it in the practice. I do a lot with chakras, and for me, like there's a lot of messages that come through. Um, and also I'll probably save the rest for maybe another episode when we do a deeper dive into energy healing. But I don't want to get too crazy in this episode because I can go to some places when talking about this. But yeah, there's different. I'll say different skills. We'll call them skills, gifts.
Yeah.
I don't know, skills. We'll call it skills. In various arenas. So there's some different things that come through, but yeah, energy healing is amazing, great. That's where I really started noticing some big shifts for me, which is one of the reasons I eventually became an energy practitioner. And this is, I think, such a valuable tool for healing. And this can work on the physical body and releasing things. A lot of, especially the way I do it, a lot of trauma patterns often come up, and we'll get messages around how do we start to shift a lot of these things, and what needs to happen around that, or maybe what are some patterns that we're telling ourselves that we need to become aware of so that we can start addressing those.
Yeah. And I feel like I want to note too, I've seen a lot of different energy healing practitioners throughout my healing journey. And I will say that like the way that you conduct your sessions and like the feedback that you give at the end is different from what I've experienced in the past. Just as far as like the breakdowns of like what's coming up for each chakra and whatnot. And I mean, again, I've seen a lot of different energy healers, and I love that you do it this way. It just seems to be more like powerful and impactful. And I'm also like a very not logical person, but it's just helpful to see the breakdown of each. Like, what can I focus on in this area or in this area? And I also love that you compared it to acupuncture, because I keep trying to think in my head, I'm like, how can we describe like energy work as different from like the emotion and the body code? And it is really about like a whole body like rebalance, very similar to acupuncture. And then, like you said, bringing to light like different areas that need to be worked on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm such a fan, and the way I do my energy healing sessions, I wasn't trained a particular way. I wasn't trained how to do this. I really have never seen anyone do energy healing sessions like this, but this is what feels good for me. This is what has felt good for me since I started practicing energy healing. And once again, I don't know. I mean, I'm a feedback person. I like to know a lot of feedback, especially in sessions and around different things. And I want to know what's coming up, what's coming through. And so I provide a lot of feedback in my sessions, which does make them a little bit different. You get kind of the best of both, where you get the actual healing experience, and a lot of feedback, and suggestions, and notes, and maybe some things to think about, maybe questions to ask yourself as we're going through. So, yeah, energy healing is great. I do offer like one-off energy healing sessions. If that is of interest to you, feel free to reach out to us, and certainly we can talk more about that. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is psychedelics, and we're just going to touch a little bit on it today, because our next episode, we're going to do a deeper dive, and this will be a lot of conversations, and I will share a lot more about my personal experiences. Shannon has a little bit of experience as well. I'll share some of my educational background around psychedelics, and working around psychedelics. I will say, for me personally, and I know a lot of people in the psychedelic space, I have pretty strong communities around around the psychedelics. This is some of the most impactful work. I mean, for me, it's the most impactful work I've ever done. I've never been able to heal at this level since starting use with psychedelic work. And I will also, couple cautions here. Uh, Please don't do this by yourself. I have never done a journey by myself, like a larger journey. And once again, we'll talk more about this next week, but never done a journey by myself. I took 3 microdosing courses with other people who were trained in this before I started microdosing by myself. And then I started doing education pretty quickly after that. So I mean, I've always been fully supported. I've always been working with someone as I've used psychedelics as a tool in micro, mini, macro doses. The environment, the setting, intentions, sourcing, everything is so important. I do not recommend hopping into this space without precautions, because it is very powerful. Psychedelics have crazy ability to help you change these neural pathways, to connect with your body, to feel into your body. You can have, I've had very somatic experiences, especially my last several journeys, which once again we'll talk about next week. But such an amazing, powerful tool. We're seeing, all of the research that has, come up in the last few years. Like, it's incredible, the power of psychedelics when used appropriately, safely, as a tool in conjunction with other tools. Like, very powerful.
Yeah. Very fitting for this episode too, because when you say that, a big thing that sticks out to me is like you need to have some practices of regulating your nervous system in place before you start something like this, because there will be things that come up in if you're not working with someone, which I would also highly recommend that, because it's really helpful to have someone guide you through that. You've got to know like some things that you can do and be prepared to help kind of bring your system back down. And I will say from my time doing this so far, you have much more experience with this than I do. However, I started using psychedelics around a time that a very close family member passed away. It kind of just like aligned as it should have, I can say. And I mean, it helped me work through that like in a way that I didn't even think was possible. Um, I'm trying to figure out how to describe it better, just in the sense of never, never in my life have I felt so connected with myself. Like that's the biggest thing that sticks out to me. And again, like I haven't even gone into doing any of the big journeys yet, but like the number one thing is just like I feel so connected with myself even when I'm not using them. That's the whole like brain rewiring, retraining portion of it is like you don't need to be on them all the time and we'll go into that next week more. But yeah, it's really an incredible shift in your healing journey when you add something like this in.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, I compared my first ever larger journey to 5 years of therapy. I mean, probably, I mean, I didn't make much progress in therapy, but I mean, like the previous 5 years, like I did it over a weekend, um, and access things I didn't know were in me, and yeah, just a full body connection and brain connection, and slowing my brain down, and yeah, I mean, it's not, I don't think I'll do psychedelics forever. Maybe I will. I don't know, but I don't feel like that will be a forever thing for me. Um, right now it's still very much a tool. I microdose sometimes. I do larger journeys occasionally. Once again, we'll dive deeper into this next week, but yeah, I mean, it really is a tool, and it really has the ability to change these neural pathways and help you really change these neural pathways from habits to deeper trauma to trauma patterns. I mean, it's incredible. And if not done appropriately, can also be a pretty negatively powerful tool. So just really, if you are interested in that and you need some safe resources, please never hesitate to reach out. I have plenty. I am a safe resource for questions, for inquiries. Yes, I do host retreats. Yes, I do some other work around this space as well. And I also have a very large network of other people around the world. And I never hesitate to refer out. Like this work is so powerful and can help so many people. Like we have seen in all of the studies with anxiety and depression and addiction and PTSD and CPTSD, and just so much trauma healing. And I mean, it's incredible the results I've seen myself and other people. Just yeah, I mean, absolutely incredible. So yeah, we're gonna dive more into that next episode, and it will be yeah, a little bit, it'll be a little bit different of an episode. Well, it'll be a little bit more like Q&A conversationally. I will be talking a lot. I don't know. Sorry if you don't like to hear me talk. You can maybe skip that episode. If you do like to hear me talk, well, bonus for you.
Yeah,
You'll hear
don't
me.
skip it. It'll be a good one.
It will be a juicy one. Yeah, I will be going pretty deep into some of my experiences personally, and then also professionally in witnessing others in my settings and other settings. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Anything else on your end for this episode?
No, I mean, I know we just like really quick because we ended with like a big thing. So I just want to throw out there like if you are interested in like jumping into this stuff and you want to, get on board with trying to regulate your nervous system. And I think we talked about this in the previous episode, but really good places to start are basic things like start with short amounts of breath work and journaling, maybe some shorter meditations, but just like checking in with yourself throughout the day. Like just start to get familiar with slowing down and listening to your body. And then, you'll start to see the signs and you can go from there. But those are like the good starting basic points.
Yeah, it doesn't have to, I mean, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like whatever you can do, like just starting somewhere goes such a long way. And here's the other thing, just going off of this is not an overnight thing. This is not take a pill, feel better, get fixed. This does take some time. So consistency is crucial. Don't be hard on yourself. Try and give yourself a little self love, a little compassion. and really try and stick with it. And after a few weeks, for some people, I mean, after a few days for some people, but definitely after a few weeks, like a month, a little over that maybe, you will really start to notice a difference. And I promise it will make a difference. And just all you have to do is start and really just be consistent. And we all can carve out 1 to 2 minutes a day. Do it in the bathroom, or whatever you need to do, just do it. It can be guided, doesn't have to be anything crazy. There's so many resources out there, but it's so impactful for your overall health, your mental health, your cognitive health, and your physical health. I mean, just like literally everything this impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. You will definitely, I mean, if you could do it for a week, you'll probably notice a shift, just like feeling more calm and like easier to slow down per se. But yeah, that was the main thing. And I do want to add this too. If you are a person who likes guided things, I would say any like guided journals. There's one called the Self-Love Workbook that's really, really basic for starting. We'll put that in the show notes too. Or just any like gratitude journals, just something like that. Really simple that only takes like a couple minutes to do. And it can be helpful in the beginning to have guidance just so your mind's not wandering all over the place.
Yeah, guided breath work, guided meditation, guided somatic practices, the TRE, any of that kind of stuff is really helpful just as guided as a starting point here. So yeah, so that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Big juicy episode next week, so make sure to tune in. And as always, we are a pretty new podcast here. If you can like, subscribe, 5-star reviews, we would really, really, really appreciate it. Every single one counts, I promise you. And thank you for joining us. If you need anything, reach out. Otherwise, we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.